Hi everyone. So these are the home movies for the Zimmerman family from 1952 to 1963. And this first shot, that's my sister Jennifer right there, who you know as Sinead. I knew her as Jennifer, so throughout this I'll be calling her Jennifer. And that woman holding her behind her there is my mom, Jeanne. There she is. And this is taken in the backyard of our house there in Whittier. That's our dog Pantaloon, by the way. They had just purchased the house. They lived in an apartment when Jennifer was born, and right after she was born, they went out and got this house and moved in. So this is right thereafter. And this is on our back porch in back of the house in the hills above Whittier. And there's again my mom. And this is in the space, that tennis court there is where they, right after this, they built a swimming pool, which you'll see shortly. So here again is my sister in the backyard playing around our little pool there. And this is in Malibu, California. And that's my dad. As you can see, he has a book next to him. He always had some books somewhere. He was an avid reader. And again, there's my mom. I don't know who that dog is, that other one. There's Dad again, reading as always. And there's Jennifer all dressed up for Easter. And this is in the front driveway of the house there in Whittier. That's my mom again. And there's Dad. And this is now, they've just put in the swimming pool. And as you can see around the edge of the pool, it isn't completely landscaped yet. There's still a lot of gravel and so forth. And that woman there is Mrs. Henderson. It's a very nice nanny we had, wonderful woman. That's my dad taking a heroic dive in the pool. Yeah, you can see the landscaping wasn't finished yet around the swimming area. You can see behind my mom too that a lot of gravel and dirt. They didn't finish the landscaping there either yet. And that's my mom teaching Jennifer how to swim for the first time. Now we're at 1954. This is the front of the house, and this is our driveway leading down to it. And there's our garage and our front door. That was my sister's window, and that was my window there on the corner. And here we go down to the front door. And now we're going around the back of the house and back of the garage. And this leads to a kind of sandbox play area we had in back by the kitchen. There, down there where my sister is going. And that's where my dad is right now. That was turned into a big sandbox later on. So that's the newly installed swimming pool. And now they finished landscaping it. And that's me. I was born in 1953, so this is just a few months after that, I believe I was 3 months old in these photographs. And that lady, I don't remember her. I don't know her name, but she was one of our nannies. And this is still in our backyard on the porch in Whittier. And that's at Penn Park, which is a park right across the street from our house down below on the hill. A very nice park. At the time it had ducks and running fountains and so forth. It doesn't have that now, but many years ago it was very well kept. And again, here we are at Malibu. And that's my Aunt Marcy. I was always doing something to pester my sister. There's my mom again. This is Christmas, I think, maybe my first Christmas. So this would have been a year. This would have been towards December. This would have been December 1954. Yeah, Christmas, all right. Christmas inside the house in Whittier. Yeah, back then they didn't have exposure meters inside cameras the way they do now. So everyone had to kind of eyeball it as far as trying to figure out the exposure. And my mom told me my dad used to tell her not to bother taking movies in the dark because they wouldn't show, but she insisted anyhow. So we've got a little bit of footage there. And this is a carousel that my mom would rent for birthday parties that would be held in our front yard. And that was a clown that came along with it. And this guy would pull up with his van and a carousel attached to it, and kids would come over and they would ride the carousel and then go and smash a piñata in the backyard, which you'll be seeing shortly. And there's my sister blowing out her candles. And that's my grandmother, Julia. There she is, Julia Zimmerman, Julia Murray originally. A wonderful woman, very kind. And that's my grandfather, Opa. His name was William Spencer Zimmerman. And he was a great guy, I really loved him. He was terrific. There's my dad. Reading as always, by the way. So there's Mom and Jennifer in the pool again. Jennifer's learned to swim by now. That's me in my crib. And that right there was the nose cone from a B-1 bomber that my dad got from somebody he knew in the weapons business. And so we end 1954 and move on to 1955. And that behind where I'm standing there on the hill is the porch. Okay, now here we are again in the front driveway. There's my sister looking pretty in her little pink dress. And here we are fishing. I believe this was a fishing spot at Knott's Berry Farm. They had a lake where you could go in and fish. And she and I both pulled some trout out of here. Knott's Berry Farm is an amusement park outside of Los Angeles. And there we are sitting in my dad's Mercedes 190 SL. And here we are back again for another birthday. Back to the front yard with the carousel and the clown. And there's my dad bringing something down for the birthday party. There's my mom. And there are all the kids that were invited to the party. And there's my sister with the glasses. So here they go into the backyard. There's Jennifer in white. I don't know who that lady was. People dressed so differently back then. Everyone was always so elegant. These are various mothers of the kids preparing the different party ornaments. There's Jennifer. There's Mom, looking very 1950-ish. And now this is at Mammoth, which is a mountain village up in California. And this is where my Aunt Sandy loved to go skiing. Sandy was an avid skier and an avid mountaineer, and she was always renting cottages and houses up at Mammoth or in Yosemite and going to Yosemite. She just loved that whole area up there. And she took me and Jennifer along with her quite a few times. She loved pampering us. She was a great aunt, a really terrific aunt, Sandy was. And this is the lodge there at Mammoth. And this appears to be an Easter egg hunt. This is an Easter egg hunt. So this is all taking place during Easter. And I guess everyone is competing with their fancy hats. I don't know who that lady is. But and this is outside a house, I believe, up in Mammoth that Sandy rented. And that's Sandy's big car. She loved huge cars. That's me and my sister and another kid. I don't know who the other kid is. Okay, and this is my Aunt Marcy. And the lady next to her is Miriam Stahl, who's a very, very close friend of my family. And that's my sister right there with Marcy. And this is Santa's Village, which is a Christmas-themed amusement park up in the mountains outside of Los Angeles. Doesn't have any rides, it just has a lot of Santa Claus-themed buildings and so forth. Igloos. There's some reindeer pulling a sled. There's more of Santa's Village. And there's Santa Claus, and there's my sister standing right beside him, and me in the front there. I don't know who the other two girls are. And here we are in 1956. And this is at the LA Zoo. And that's Jennifer, and that is my dad standing next to her. And at this time, Jen would have been about 4 years old. And that's me and my sister next to some strange sculpture. I don't know who that is. This is at Knott's Berry Farm. Knott's Berry Farm is another amusement park, theme park outside of Los Angeles. And here we are back at the pool again. That's Jennifer swimming. That's Jennifer taking a dive. And that's the two of us. And that's my opa. He was a lot of fun, really a great guy. And he loved playing with us. He was a very interesting man. He was a self-made millionaire, made a fortune during the Depression by trading copper futures. So he was a self-made man. And one day he came home and told my grandmother that he had become a millionaire. And he hung his coat up and never worked again a day in his life. He spent the rest of his life traveling with my grandmother, took her all over the world. Very, very interesting man. There's Jennifer. There's Opa again. And this is at Disneyland. This is the entrance to Disneyland. That's my sister going in there. And there's the Enchanted Castle at Disneyland, which is fashioned after a famous German castle, a Bavarian castle. And here's one of the many rides that they have at Disneyland. I forget the name of this one. I haven't been there in so many years. There we are with Marcy going on the ride with us. And here's my sister and I inside the teacup, which is a really fun ride. I still remember that. And this part of Disneyland is called Frontierland, and the theme of it is the American frontier and Huckleberry Finn and the old Mississippi. So that's supposed to be a recreation of the Mississippi River. And this is the Indian themed section of Disneyland. And here's my sister doing a powwow dance. There she is. And Mom's with her. And this is my mom and dad going to Europe in 1956. And here we are at LAX, where they're about to take a plane to New York so that they can then take the boat, the ocean liner, to Europe. People didn't fly to Europe much in those days. They would fly to New York and then get on a ship and take the ship to Europe. So that's Cindy and Candy Reed. They were the daughters of neighbors of ours and very good friends of my parents. And that's their parents, Lou Reed and Carol Reed. And they lived about 3 blocks away from us. And we used to go visit them all the time. Very nice people. And he was in the weapons business. And here's my mom coming out of a building with Opa. And this is the Roman Forum. It's actually a villa that's inside of the Roman Forum, so. But the name of that villa escapes me right now. And here is the Fountain of Trevi in Rome. My mother loved sculptures, and so she loved to go visit all the places that had sculptures in them. And she loved coming to Trevi to visit and see these beautiful works of art. And she'd take us to different churches and show us the different famous sculptures that Michelangelo had done. Very interesting. And this is St. Peter's Square. And there is the Pope out on his balcony. I believe that's Pope Pius XII. That's 2 years before John the 23rd would become Pope. He's making some kind of announcement. I don't know what. The popes have a greeting every Sunday where they come out of their apartment window and greet the faithful who congregate down in St. Peter's Square. But that's not this. This is something else. I just don't know what this is. And there's the crowd at St. Peter's. There's Dad. And here we are at the Pyramid of Caius Cestius. There it is right there. And this is near the Porta San Paolo outside of Rome. And this is right next to what's called the Protestant Cemetery, where Keats and Shelley are buried. And this is the Protestant Cemetery. There's a sign leading to their graves. And that's my dad looking around there. And that's Shelley's grave. You can see his name in the upper right-hand corner. And there's my grandfather looking at Keats' gravestone, which we'll see in a moment. Here it is. And this is the Via Ostiense, which is an ancient road that leads all the way down to Ostia, which was an old Roman port where the Tiber met the ocean. And here in this group is my dad and my grandfather, and my mom obviously taking the photographs here. And this is Ostia, which is the ancient port. There's my dad, looking dapper as always. And this is an amphitheater in Ostia. And this is the remainder of the ruins there at Ostia. And this is the Tivoli Gardens, which is a huge villa outside of Rome that is filled with fountains. It has literally hundreds of fountains. It's a beautiful place, you can see there. This doesn't begin to show you how many fountains there are, but the whole place is full of them. It's a remarkable place. And this is Venice, the Grand Canal. There are a bunch of gondolas. And a gondoliere who's pushing that gondola along. And this is the Bridge of Sighs, which is a bridge that prisoners would be taken to just before they were put into the Piombi, into a subterranean prison there in Venice. And that was the last sunshine they would ever see. That's why it's called the Bridge of Sighs, because they would sigh when they walked through it. And this is the Piazza San Marco, and that's the clock up at the top of the tower. And here is the Basilica San Marco. And in front of this is a huge square where people feed pigeons. There are just hundreds and hundreds of pigeons. And tourists delight in buying food for them and feeding them. And here's my dad feeding some of the pigeons there in Piazza San Marco. Again, he's always dressed up nice in a suit. But as you can see, that's how everybody dressed back then. Much more formal than today. And there's my mom. Here's some more of Venice on one of the canals. It's really a shame that back then they didn't have better exposure techniques. Everyone had to kind of eyeball how they figured out the right exposure for their film. And so it's amazing they were ever able to get any good footage at all, considering they guessed. They would read a paper that would say, at this time of day, use this aperture, and if it's the afternoon, use a different aperture, and they would just roll the dice and hope it came out good. And here we are in 1957. My sister would be 6 years old, and I would be 4 years old. And this is up in Yosemite. This is a beautiful park, again, outside of Los Angeles, up in the mountains. It's not right out of LA, it's up in a little more north in California, but it's an absolutely beautiful location. There's me. I was an absolutely terrible skier. I was never able to get it. For some reason, it never caught on with me. Sandy tried everything she could. She bought me those beautiful little skis and got me the whole outfit to go skiing with her. And for some reason, it just never worked out. What you're seeing right now, that's me at my best. That's me. That's how I stopped when I wanted to come to a halt. I would just tip over and fall. I've seen several photographs of this fellow here. I don't remember if that was my Uncle Don or not. It may have been him. Uncle Don was my Aunt Sandy's husband. That may be my Uncle Don, I'm not sure. He drowned tragically, leaving my aunt a widow. And with insurance money she got from his death, she bought a big Lincoln Continental car, a huge automobile. And here we are at an Easter egg hunt up there in Yosemite. That's my sister, and that is my Aunt Sandy right there. So at Easter they would have these, it's a tradition here in America, they have an Easter egg hunt where they hide Easter eggs all over a location and the kids go out and hunt for the Easter eggs. There's my mom. And there we are collecting Easter eggs, finding them hidden under rocks and so forth and putting them in the basket. There's my sister. There are the beautiful mountains of Yosemite, and that's a very famous waterfall at Yosemite, photographed by lots of people like Ansel Adams and Edward Weston and many other photographers. This is more photographs of the lodge there at Yosemite. Look at the cars they drove back in the 50s, what the buses looked like. And this is on Balboa Island, which is a rich enclave south of Los Angeles. There's me with a little fish. That's my sister. And that's Mary Page, who was a friend of the family, a good friend of my mom's. That's my dad. And this is Pacific Ocean Park, which is an entertainment park near Santa Monica in Los Angeles. It used to be, it's gone now. but it had lots of roller coasters, and it was right on the ocean, a lot of fun. And some of the fountains at POP, it was called Pacific Ocean Park. And there's Jennifer, me and Jennifer eating cotton candy. And here we are going up one of the rides there at POP. One of the roller coasters they had. That's Jennifer, standing by the ocean. The park there being right on the water, so you can step down and go onto the beach. And this is a horse riding park outside of Whittier, where you could go rent time on a horse or on a pony. There's Jennifer riding. Here she comes, riding away. And Sandy would take us to this. There's Jennifer again. Sandy would take me and my sister to this. She loved animals, and she loved taking us to different places, so this is one of the places she took us. And that's Sandy there. That's the giant Lincoln Continental she bought after Don's death. I don't know who this is, just some helicopter that was flying by they photographed. And there's my sister all in white coming down the stairs for another birthday. And that's Candy Reed right there. And that's one of our dogs, that's Blondie. She was the female. There's my dad, standing in the trunks there in the middle. I don't know who the other two fellows were. And that's my sister's birthday cake. I remember that so clearly, that cake. With Zorro on it, Zorro themed. And that's me in my little clown outfit. And this is in front of our house. And that design you see on the floor, my mother made that on the tile there of the dog. And this is a cakewalk. No, this is the costume parade at the grade school that my sister and I went to, Mar Vista School. in Whittier. And those buildings behind are the classrooms that we attended. And this space right here was our playground. And here we are, another Easter egg hunt. Okay, this is the piñata that we had as an amusement thing that we would do at a birthday party. A piñata is where you blindfold someone, you give them a stick, and they try to hit this this item that's filled with candy. And if you can strike it, if you hit it hard enough, it'll break open and all the candy spills down onto the ground. So that's my grandmother and grandfather. There's my grandmother pointing and my opa next to her. And they're watching this from the terrace above. This is all in our backyard. You can see it's rather hard to hit the piñata when you're blindfolded, but that's part of the fun. And that's candy coming out now. Everyone running to get the candy. There, they're trying to get the last of it out. There's my sister with the glasses. There's Opa and Nana again. And that's my dad and my Opa. My dad is on the right and Opa is on the left. And that fellow in the middle is a general that my dad knew. I don't remember the general's name, but he was an old friend of my dad's. And here's my sister and I ready to jump in the pool. There's Jennifer. And there's me with my inner tube that I used to play with in the pool. We had a lot of fun swimming in that pool. That was a great place. There's Jennifer. And these are some pets that we used to have. Those are two baby mockingbirds that we kept as pets. We found, and so we took care of them. We fed them and then kept them. And those are a couple of toads that I had. And that's our pet hamster. And here we are in 1958. My mom and dad took a second trip to Europe. And here they are on the ocean liner leaving the harbor at New York. And that's the Empire State Building in the background there. And now here they are out at sea on the way to Europe. And here they are arriving in Europe. And there's my mom dressed in the red coat. There's my dad, very well dressed as usual. And here we are in Paris. I'm not familiar enough with Paris to know what building this is. You may recognize it. There's my dad. There's my dad again. There's my mom. Interesting to see the buses and vehicles they drove back then. And this is Switzerland. There's my dad, and there's his Mercedes 190 SL that he bought in Germany and drove through Europe with. And this is back in Venice on the Grand Canal. There's my dad again, sitting in Piazza San Marco. I don't know who those other people are. Dad would make friends with all kinds of people. He would walk up to total strangers and start talking to them. And he made friends everywhere. He was very good that way. And there's Dad again. St. Mark's Basilica. So my parents went alone to Europe, and my Aunt Marcy looked after us while they were in Europe. We had a lot of fun back at home while they were gone. So we're not in any of these pictures here. Now there's the Doge's Palace in Venice. And more of the Grand Canal. What's interesting to note is that in these smaller channels, such as this, the water is quite shallow. It's only a couple of feet deep. It's deep in the Grand Canal, but in the smaller canals, it's quite shallow. And that's the hotel they used to stay at, the San Daniele, which was, I guess, at least my mom told me, the ritziest hotel they had in Venice. There's my dad. And here we are in Florence at Palazzo Vecchio, and this is Piazza della Signoria. And right now what you're looking at is the loggia, which is a canopied space outside of Palazzo Vecchio. And it's in that area that the original David by Michelangelo used to stand. And then eventually, in order to protect it, it was removed from that place and put inside of a building, and a copy of it was placed outside, which you'll see shortly here. There it is. That's where the original David used to stand. And this is in the hills of Rome, overlooking from the Villa Borghese, which is one of the best views into Rome. You can see the whole city from up here. And there's the wedding cake in the background, which is the monument to the unknown soldier. And there's St. Peter's. And this particular terrace we're standing on is right above Piazza del Popolo. And this is from the Villa Borghese. It's a huge, huge park. And this right here is the balcony that Mussolini used to stand on when he would give his weekly address to the fascists and the patriots. And this is the wedding cake, also known as the Vittoriano, which is the monument to the first king of Italy, Vittorio Emanuele. And this is St. Peter's Square. And there's the front of the basilica. And this is the Pope appearing in his apartment window, giving a papal blessing, which he does every Sunday at noon. He comes out, says a few words, and then goes back inside. And this is a quick shot of the Amalfi coastline. This is around Naples. And that's obviously the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's quite something to see in real life. It's interesting in a photograph, but if you actually walk up and see it, it's breathtaking. And this is the Roman Forum. So back in Rome again. There's the Colosseum. And there's Dad. There's Mom and Dad. This is the inside of the Colosseum. And there's Mom, and this is at the Fountain of Trevi. And this is at the Palazzo Quirinale, which is the presidential palace where the president of Italy lives. And this is the changing of the guard that happens at noon. So here's my dad with a very good friend of his named Otto Skorzeny. Let me explain to you who this man is. He was a famous German war hero in World War II, known for leading the team that rescued Benito Mussolini in a daring air raid when Mussolini was held under arrest by the Italian government in 1943. It was a huge propaganda coup for Goebbels, much needed by the Nazis at that point of the war, and as a result, Otto became quite famous in Germany. While Skorzeny was in prison after the war, my dad, being somewhat of a fan of his, wrote to him and the two became pen pals. After Otto was released a few years later, my dad went to meet him in Germany and they became best friends. Otto wasn't involved in any of the Holocaust. His exploits were all on the battlefield, and he got quite a few decorations for them. And anyhow, that woman next to him is his wife, Elsa. And of course, there's my dad standing next to Otto. And they lived in Spain at the time. And here's some Spanish castle. So this man here is Count Tuptani. He was a very close friend of my parents, and he belonged to an old Spanish family that went back hundreds and hundreds of years. They owned something like 7 castles and all kinds of land in Spain. I believe this was one of his properties. I'm not sure though. And there's Elsa Scherzani again. And there's Otto. It's very common for Nazis after the war to flee to Spain or move to Spain. There's Dad. There's Mom. And there's Otto's medals, the Iron Cross, which he was given by Hitler for his for rescuing Mussolini. That's the iron, the Knight Cross, it was called. There's Otto again. There's Elsa. There's Mom and Dad again. My dad was always such a nice dresser. There's Mom. She too, I kind of marvel at the way people dressed when they traveled, 60 and 70 years ago. Everybody was so elegant, not today. Everyone's so casual. But this would all be more hillside in Spain. Now here we are in Whittier, 1958. There's my sister swimming next to me. There's Jennifer swimming some more. And here's my sister diving into the pool. We really loved swimming in that pool. We were in the water all the time. And the chlorine in the water would bleach our hair bright blonde. So all throughout our childhood, our hair was a really bright, almost white blonde. That went away after we stopped swimming in the pool when we moved to Europe. There's that nose cone from the B-52. Someone in the military gave that to us to use in the swimming pool, but it is part of the nose cone off a military airplane. And here's my mom. And there, that person, I don't know who that was, that little girl. And these are the puppies that our dogs had. We had two standard poodles, Blackie and Blondie, and they had 12 puppies, or Blondie was the female, she had 12 puppies. 6 were white, 6 were black, 6 were male, 6 were female. And here we are playing with the puppies. There's Blondie. There she is. There's Mom again. Right, sitting in that ivy patch. She reached into that patch once to pick up one of the puppies, and instead she pulled up this huge toad, and she screamed at the top of her voice. Yeah, never forget that. Okay, here we are by the pool again with Opa. He was a lot of fun. He was a really great guy. And there's Blackie, the father of our puppies. There's Blondie swimming in the water. Yeah, they both love to get into the pool on a hot day. They would get in, get wet, and then get out and shake off. There she goes. So now there are the puppies as they started getting bigger. We eventually gave all of them away. Of course, this is all in our backyard there at the house in Whittier. And this is my sister and I playing in the snow up at Mammoth on one of the trips that Aunt Sandy had brought us up to the mountains to stay at one of the houses or cabins that she rented up there. And there's my sister in the blue. And this is a lake called Horseshoe Lake. It's a lake that's filled with frogs and toads, and Sandy found out about it. And so as a treat, she took me and my sister up there. And indeed, it was filled with frogs, and I loved it. I was in seventh heaven and had a great time that day. Sandy really delighted in taking us on trips and kind of doting on us and so forth. She didn't have any kids of her own, so she really enjoyed kind of being a second mom to us. And this was one of those great trips that we had together with her. And this was a wonderful day. This is a lake located in Central California. And there's Jennifer. She didn't mind the toads at all. And this is at a ranch that was up in Mammoth in one of the trips that Sandy took my sister and I on to stay up at her cabin up there up in the mountains. There was a ranch nearby, and we went to go visit the horses. And here we are feeding them sugar cubes. You can barely see them, but in our hands we're holding little cubes of sugar, which is kind of a tradition in America. When we feed horses, we give them sugar cubes. And there we are, and there's my sister standing next to me. There's Jennifer right there. that Sandy loved animals. I mean, she was a real animal lover. I loved animals and my mom loved animals, but Sandy loved animals more than anybody. And so she would find places like this where there were, and take us to see them. And she would go out and buy food for the animals, for horses and so forth, and go feed them. Yeah, she was really big on that. I remember she brought us over here she told us all about the horses, and so she took us to see them. And this is in the yard up there at Mammoth, in the cabin, or the yard around the cabin that Sandy had rented that particular season. And I can tell you right now what we're doing is we're throwing feed out for the birds. That was another thing that Sandy loved doing, is she would get feed for birds, buy bags of it, and then take it to parks or take it to areas where she knew that birds congregated, and she would feed them. She'd buy huge bags of bird feed and go out and do that. So I can see she told us here too. Gave us feed to feed all the birds with. There's breakfast, and I'm probably having hot chocolate. There's cereal that my sister liked eating. I can't see what brand that was. So here we are in the summer of 1962. So let me give you a little bit of background about what was going on here. In 1962, my grandfather was diagnosed with lung cancer, terminal, and he only had about a year left to live. And so as a gift to my mom and me and my sister, he decided to take us all on a long final trip together. And so we went up to, we all got in the car and we drove up to Oregon, saw Crater Lake, and then we went up to Canada. And we spent a couple of weeks together, and we had a really wonderful time. And so this segment is all about the things that we saw on that trip, and really our last journey with our grandfather. So here we are on a boat going somewhere. This looks like a ferry that was taking moving our car across a channel someplace, I think on the way to Canada. I don't know, I don't remember exactly where, but that car in the background is my mom's Buick. That's what we drove up to Canada in. There's my grandfather. There's my sister waving hello. And this building right here is a newspaper called the Daily Record that my grandfather worked at when he was a young man. So that was his building, and he showed us, we went right up to the window and he looked in, and he showed us the desk that he used to work at when he was a journalist there. And this is in Seattle. And this is in Toronto now, and that's a totem pole from the indigenous Indians there. And this is a horse show somewhere in Toronto. I don't know exactly what this is about. Nonetheless, this was a show we went to see with my grandmother and grandfather. The whole family went to see this there in Canada. There's my grandfather, probably the last photograph I have of him. There's my sister and I coming down the stairs. And here's my grandmother coming down the stairs. And here's my sister and I. There's Jennifer with her butterfly glasses, picking some flowers. I think this is around Crater Lake in Oregon. And here we are feeding some squirrels. Again, there at Crater Lake. Crater Lake is a lake inside of a volcano. And in the middle of the volcano is a little island, and the island is surrounded with water. And here we are back in Whittier now. That man standing next to my dad is Father Michael. He was a Catholic priest and a good friend of the family, and he used to come over and spend time with us in the afternoon. A very nice guy, very good guy. And here we are bouncing around. That's my sister in the background and me jumping around here on the trampoline. My dad bought us a trampoline, and I just loved that thing. And I would get on top of that and bounce around for hours, learning how to do flips and somersaults and backflips and so forth. And here's my sister again taking a dive in the pool. And here's another birthday, and I'm doing a freeze frame here to feature our good friend Vicki Walton. She's the girl on the right there, and was our neighbor. She lived 2 doors down from us, and was one of my best friends and constant playmates throughout my childhood. I haven't seen her now for, almost 50, 60 years, something like that. But I'm just kind of doing this freeze frame, kind of a little tribute to her, since she was such a good friend. I don't know whose birthday this was, if it was mine or my sister's. And that's our front door to the house. A little cap on, LA Dodgers cap. And this is the trip that we took to Europe in 1963. So here my sister and I are on the boat going to Europe, the ocean liner leaving New York. And there we are as we're taking off from the harbor, throwing confetti overboard. And there's the Statue of Liberty as we leave New York Harbor. And here we are arriving in the mainland. That may be Spain, or that may be Northern Africa, I don't know which. And this is at Castle San Angelo in Rome. They had a lot of medieval weapons there, and I just love that place. It's a huge weapons museum inside. And since I was really into crossbows and catapults, like here's a catapult that they have there. And I just, I went and played all over these things. There's a ballista, which is a giant, kind of giant crossbow, but it shot giant bolts. And this is the view out from Castle San Angelo, looking out over Rome. And this is very close to the neighborhood that we eventually moved into in 1963, or the summer of 1964, actually. When we finally moved in 1 year later, we would move there permanently. That's really our neighborhood where we finally ended up living. Just right that part of Rome right there. And there's the Tiber River. And in the background there, here you can see St. Peter's, and that's Via della Constellazione leading up to it. That's the Vatican. And that's an angel on the top of Castle San Angelo. And that right there is the courtyard from the apartment building that we lived in that summer, in the summer of '63, at 66 Via Giulia. And here we are at the Tivoli Gardens outside of Rome. And there's Jennifer. And there's some of the fountains. And here's some more fountains. Again, still at the Tivoli Gardens. And there's my sister and I. And I don't know who that person sitting next to us is. It's not my mother. I don't remember who that was. And these are the doors to the baptistry next to the Duomo there in Florence. The doors done by Ghiberti and then Brunelleschi, very famous, also known as the Doors of Paradise. And my mother, obviously loving sculpture, photographed these. Unfortunately, they're a little dark, but nonetheless. And this is from the Belvedere in Florence, overlooking the Arno River. And that was Ponte Vecchio in the background. And that tall building is Palazzo della Signoria. And there's one of the many copies of Michelangelo's David. And here we are in San Mark's Plaza in Venice, feeding the pigeons, just like my parents did before us. And this is in Switzerland. These were taken outside of the headquarters for the Girl Scouts. My sister, being an avid scouter, wanted to go visit this, and so we drove up there. And this chalet is officially known as the World Center for Girl Guides and Girl Scouts in Adelboden, Switzerland. Originally opened in 1932. It was briefly closed during World War II and then reopened again in 1946. Now I believe that there are a total of 4 installments around the world. And here we see all the Swiss Alps behind it. There's another shot of the chalet, the World Center. And here's my sister, all dressed up in her Girl Scout uniform. Look at the sash she has with all those merit badges on it. And that's it for all of the family film. So thank you for watching.